Hello, everyone. This is Pam Ostrowski with Alzheimer's Family Consulting, and I welcome all of you to the very important conversation about the 7 tips for children or adult children with dementia, a dementia parent. And just so that you know, I've been doing this for about 25 years, working with having my own personal experience and for 14 years with my mom. After she passed, I wrote my book, It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey. And the book is a guidebook for people just like me and you who are adults trying to manage potentially kids and parent care and trying to work through a lot of the complexities of aging senior care and in the healthcare system. And it's a challenge, especially these days, because there's so much red tape and so many things that are covered and not covered. And you have to figure all that out for your parents a lot of times, because if they have dementia, they can't do it on their own. So that's kind of my orientation. And then I work personally with adults who have parents with Alzheimer's. And we just, work through some of the most difficult things that we all encounter. So we're going to, as far as logistics go, I just want to remind you that we do these the 4th Tuesday of every month. And we basically do these for an hour, same time, but the 4th Tuesday, which means the next one will be April 28th. So let's dive into the logistics of being an adult, having a life, working spouse or partner of some sort, having other interests, whatever it might be, and making sure that we preserve that while also caring for loved ones with dementia. So thank you so much for coming today to talk about this. Please put any questions you have in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. I do want to give a special shout out to the people who replied back to my email that asked, this is probably 3 or 4 days ago, that asked about, responded to my question about what are you guys interested in? What challenges are you facing? So I would like to address those first to make sure everybody can go back to the recording and listen and that type of thing. But while I'm doing that we have a lot more that are based on people that we work with. But I would love for you to put information in the chat in order to get the answers to your questions now today. All right, so let's get started. So the first response to someone who had submitted a question was, how do I avoid my loved one being taken advantage of by children, family members, people in general? And this is the time-consuming part of having a parent with dementia, because you have to have the infrastructure in place. So that's healthcare power of attorney and durable or legal power of attorney. Depends on what state you're in as to exactly what they're called. But one is responsible for the financial decisions and what happens with the money and how it's invested. And the other one is responsible for doctor's appointments, making healthcare decisions, hopefully based on your loved one's wishes. And so if you have those 2 documents, sometimes you're not the person who's in either one of those roles, and yet you're concerned about your mom or your dad being taken advantage of. So at some level, you have no control over it. In other words, if your parent has chosen a brother to be the legal power of attorney, and you believe that let's say your mom, who has Alzheimer's, actually afflicts more women than men, that you say, well, she needs to, in my case, my mom needed dentures and to replace her current dentures. Now I was both, which which worked out really well, and I highly advise that rather than splitting the roles, because then you've got contention about, well, where do we spend money on medical expenses and where do we spend money on wherever it is she's living. So it could be an existing home, it could be senior living, be memory care. So now you've got that conflict if you have two different people doing that. So I highly advise combining them and also having a backup person. So that could be you're the key person for both, and then your brother is the reverse, but the challenge, this is called family dynamics. The challenge that you'll face is that if you aren't in charge, and hello, type A women, I was one, or probably am still, is that if we disagree on what's happening with the care of our loved one, then there's not a lot of recourse unless abuse is involved. In other words, the durable power of attorney is withholding care, or well-being of, living situation is not adequate. Then you can go to an ombudsman, or you can go to an elder care attorney. And if it's really bad, adult protection services. So there are places for recourse, but I always suggest you start with a conversation and ask questions. So if you observe this person being taken advantage of, then you can go ahead and confront the individual and turn around and ask, why is this happening? Why are you okay with withholding money for mom? Because that puts them in a position of having to defend themselves and to explain the reasoning. And that gives you more information in order to ask the next questions. And a lot of times when we're in a sibling situation, it can be really challenging because there's a lot of history there of who's been in charge and what's happened and all those things. And you have to really push all of those things aside and think about your loved one first and what's best for them. And sometimes that involves getting other people, other professionals involved. So next question is, how do you address, it should say, hygiene issues? So if, let's say your mom is living with you or your dad's living with you and they won't take a shower, or they won't brush their teeth, or all of those things, okay? So the first thing I ask you to do is to come from a place of kindness, compassion, and empathy, because this is something that we don't realize how difficult it is for them. You don't know what's happening inside of their head to cause that behavior. And sometimes this is just a bad week or a bad day. I don't want to brush my teeth, and they're resistant. So there's a couple of techniques that you can use. And for bathing, a lot of times, Paige had that story from the last webinar of the gentleman taking a shower, and he came out and his wife said, "Why is your skin so red?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." And it had to do with he turned the hot water on all the way, and there was no governor to stop it from the kind of the scalding level. And so I said, just go down to the hot water heater, because obviously it's hot, and turn the temperature down so it can never get to that scalding level. So, and her advice was for the wife to pay more attention to the showering process. But he could turn the dial after she leaves. So those are the kinds of things that I had a client whose mother was afraid of the shower. Like, first of all, they have to take all their clothes off. And you should be there with them to make sure that they're not going to fall, right? So mobility issues. I would suggest you have a chair It should be a walk-in shower, and there should be a chair inside the shower so they can just sit down and shower that way. So it makes it more convenient, but it's also really awkward to have somebody else helping you when you're naked. So I advise using a robe and getting them into the shower without the water on and getting them comfy. And if they, get a large hand towel and cover up a little of the private parts if they need it, and then turn on the shower, making sure that it doesn't just blast them, right? So this is a lot of control. This is where one of those hand wands is really helpful, because that way you can control where the water is and how strong it is and what it's covering versus, a wall mount one that just blasts you, right? And when you're cognitively capable and you've been gardening all day, that feels great. But for someone who this is a scary experience, then this is really important to make it a pleasurable experience and safe so that they don't feel uncomfortable. And, you can close the shower curtain, but stay in the room, in the bathroom, just to make sure that everybody's okay and that if they have any questions. So depending on their level of dementia, you got to keep that environment very clear. So you may have a bar of soap and that's it. Or if you have shampoo, are they going to know that's what it is? So we just assume they're in there taking a shower, but you really don't know what they're doing. So that's a really important aspect of hygiene. I also had a client whose husband wouldn't brush his teeth, and they had tried everything. They brought in a mobile dentist, and that was a disaster. Just because the mobile dentist didn't have any training in dementia, and so he gets out his tools and everything and those big pointy picker thingies, and it's just like, what are you going to do? So it was alarming to the individual. And I said, have you tried brushing your teeth next to him to show him what you want him to do? She's like, no. And then she tried it the next day. She texted me and said, oh my gosh. So show, don't tell. So if there's a hygiene issue, you can put out a bar of soap and a washcloth, make it big enough that they can cover all the parts. And you obviously can't show that part, but helping them see things that are familiar. So a lot of people use the pump for the soap these days and have a little poof and things. Well, if your loved one is used to a bar of soap and a hand wash towel, that's not going to make any sense to them. So we have to think about, okay, what were we using 20 years ago? Because that's what they can remember is something that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And ultimately, that's how we help them, especially with brushing your teeth and taking a shower. Now, I noticed we have some things here in the chat. I'm my father's guardian and health rep. I also am the only child. He lives with myself, my husband, and an adult son. We control his money, but feel guilty about using it to help pay my bills. Is this a normal feeling? I had the exact same situation where I did a lot of research when I was caring for my parents because my dad had vascular dementia later in life, like right before he passed, and my mom had Alzheimer's for 14 years. And so when he moved into memory care, I took over everything, and I was kind of taking over things before that. And I would pay myself for the services of caring for them. It's a thing. It's okay. If you were a caregiver for someone else, you would get paid. So you're doing the same. In addition, you're managing finances. So you're a bookkeeper or accountant. You're taking care of their medical needs and you're buying things for them. So absolutely be okay with being paid. I mean, you wouldn't go to work and say, hey, everybody, you can skip my paycheck for the next 2 weeks. I don't really need it. Same thing. You should get paid, providing they have the funds to do that. But then you just make it commensurate with what they're able to pay you. So if they were able, and I looked up what's the average amount. and that is $2,000 a month. Um, but that was 10 years ago. So you have to think about, and all the expenses, so fuel, food, all the things, anything that you buy for your house to help accommodate them, they should be paying for. And the fact that your dad's living with you, you're a saint. That can be stressful for everybody. So, and we can talk more about that if you would like. But yes, guilt is a major feeling for caregivers about everything. Am I visiting enough? Am I doing the right thing? All these questions come up because you're trying to do the best you can. And guess what? You are doing the best you can. And so coming to a webinar like this or watching the recording helps you get educated on what to do and what not to do and to get some ideas on how to handle things. Okay, Sue says, my husband and I are taking care of my 83-year-old young mom. I like that. I work full time and I'm an only child. Woo! My question is, how do you handle, where'd it go? How do you handle how my loved one talks to the TV and offers them their dinner or money? You let them do it. There's no harm in doing that. So one of the things that we as adult children really want to do with our dementia parent is control their behavior. That's not normal. You shouldn't do that. Well, that's based on protocols of our youth, of society. When someone has dementia, as long as it's not disturbing the rest of the family, let him do it. And if it does, put him in a room and let him do his thing there. Talk to the TV, offer them dinner. He's obviously having some hallucinations of some sort where he's not perceiving that the TV isn't a real person or the people on the TV aren't. And that's okay. That could be Lewy body disease, it could be vascular dementia, but ultimately it doesn't matter. I would advise, and I regret, so I'm trying to prevent you guys from saying I regret. I regret that I tried to control mostly my dad and his situation because I was like, Dad, that doesn't make sense. Or what's wrong with you that you don't understand the plot of a movie, like following a movie, a TV show or something? He'd be like, that guy looks just like the guy who was in the previous scene. And I said, that's because it is. And there's a point where you can introduce humor, which yay, humor. If you can be humorous about just about anything in this situation, do it, because bringing levity makes you both feel better. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here. We can't fix the problem. So we need to figure out, how are we going to change ourselves? Because we're the ones who can change. How are we going to change how we communicate, what we accept and don't accept as normal? Not trying to control what they're doing, but instead to facilitate and support the best environment so that they can be successful being independent. So that would be my thought about the money. And then how do you tell if it's dementia versus Alzheimer's you're dealing with? An MRI. So first of all, Alzheimer's is dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term for all of the different types of diseases that affect the brain. It's a condition, it's not a disease. And it's a condition that affects the brain in a way that impacts your ability to do activities of daily living. So it isn't just memory loss. It isn't just, oh, I forgot where my keys are. It's, I can't remember how to bake a cake, my favorite recipe. I can't remember how to do familiar daily tasks. I get disoriented when I go to the mall. I don't remember which door I came through. I don't remember where I parked my car. I don't remember how to get to the gas station or back home. So that's what dementia is. Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for between 60 and 80% of the dementia types or dementia diseases, is, according to the Alzheimer's Association, is specific to the ability to not do tasks, to can't, you have difficulty with your selecting the right words, different words come out when you mean a different word, those types of things. Whereas vascular dementia is what I like to call the angry paranoid dementia. And that's the one where your mom hides her purse, puts her purse, either hides her purse or accuses you of stealing money or accuses you of stealing the purse or whatever. And my dad went through that. And he would get really angry, and I'd be like, whoa, 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 let's go look for, he was looking for his hand sewing machine. He needed to put a hem in something. And I said, well, where have you looked? And he's like, I've looked everywhere. I said, all right, well, is it okay if I go look? He's like, yeah, you're not going to find it. Someone took it. This was when he lived in a senior living community. So sure enough, I go in the closet, I lift off a couple of boxes, I find the sewing machine. And I hand it to him and I said, did you accuse anyone of stealing this by chance? And I said, if so, I'll just go get them and we can apologize because, we don't want them feeling badly about you or this experience. And so we would do that. But that's more vascular dementia. There are over 100 types of dementia, but a majority of them fall under the Alzheimer's category. Now, to answer your question, how do you tell? It's not to take a 4-hour test. So these neurologists are now sending people. I get so many adults saying to me, they want my husband or my mom or my dad to go through a 4-hour test. And it's like, if you have test anxiety, you don't sleep well, you have medications that are, trying to, that they're not working well together. There's so many things that can affect those test results. And then they'll ask the person, so how do you think you're doing? Oh, I think I'm great. In early stage Alzheimer's, they think they're fantastic. And they're very resistant to any diagnosis because they're fine. And so that gets frustrating. So the best way to get a diagnosis, an accurate diagnosis, is through an MRI, a PET scan, and yay, now they have a blood test. Now, I don't know, it's much cheaper than the PET scan, the PET scan. And that's where you're going to have to determine, how much everything costs and what the copays are and all that kind of thing. But they should pay, Medicare should pay for an MRI. And the MRI will show you and set a benchmark, which is really, the way you need to position this. So let me give you a heads up on this. There's usually a lot of resistance. I don't need any testing. I'm fine. I'm not going to go into the doctor's office. First, tell a neurologist that you suspect that your loved one has dementia and you want an MRI. So you're going to this is where if you're medical power of attorney, you can really put some pressure on the doctors and say, no, we're not doing tests. We're going to start with an MRI because a healthy brain it shows up mostly white on an MRI, and an Alzheimer's brain shows up with big black spots. And as the disease progresses, the big black spots get bigger. And what happens, the reason why we have ups and downs with our loved one, where they seem fine one moment and they aren't anymore the next moment, is that neuroplasticity is the official name. Your brain is able to take a new pathway to find the information that they need. But as the black part gets bigger, right, the disease progresses, then that neuroplasticity loses its path. It can't go to that place anymore. So absolutely get an MRI. Okay. More questions. Hi. Hello, Melissa. My 79-year-old mom is refusing to get diagnosed with what we believe is Alzheimer's. It's probably dementia because there's so many different kinds. She won't listen to the doctor, family, and I believe it's, yes, it's a hard word to pronounce, but anosognosia. We are desperate to get her help. Okay. This is about positioning, and it's kind of a way to market, think of it that way, market something that somebody doesn't know they need or want. You watch TV, watch ads, that's marketing. So what we're going to do is we're going to market that, mom, you're almost 80, and it's really important. Just like when we do mammograms or blood tests or blood panels, we need to take a look at your brain. So, and ask the neurologist for an open MRI, because a closed MRI is a tube. I've had a few, and my mom had one, and I had to keep my hands on her knees and make sure that she didn't move because you have to hold still. And they put your head in a brace, and that can be really scary too. So expect to go in and be with the person. And a good MRI tech will allow you to do whatever you need to do. Just don't wear any metal. And so if you have an open MRI, then it's just a ring, and it's much more comforting. It's not as scary as going into the tube. And so you can say, Mom, we need to do a benchmark. We need to see what your brain looks like. And you can do that, or research who does blood tests, the Alzheimer's blood test, and see, and then just say, hey, we're just going to do our usual blood work. And the reason, just to get behind the question, the reason why she doesn't want to do this is she already knows the problem, and it's scaring her to death. And it's easy as an adult child to look at your parent and say, look, this is what you need to do. You're like, well, it's the worst thing you could possibly say, because you're their child. What do you know? Right? You gained no credibility by being 50 years old. You are still their child, and they cannot, they're not going to listen to you, and you can't tell them what to do. It's all about marketing. So you can say, oh, we just need to go do our usual blood test. She's not going to know that there's a blood test for Alzheimer's now. So find the place that and if you need resources or need to find out more, just reply back to one of my emails, and I will get back to you with what we know for resources that do blood tests. Just let me know what city you're in. So that really has to do with wording. Now, just so you guys know, I offer a free 30-minute consult. Just email me and tell me a couple of days that work for you, and then we'll coordinate schedules. But sometimes it's a little hard to address this at this level of detail. So, but that's exactly what you need to do, is get her tested either through an open MRI or through the blood test, and pitch it as a benchmark, a way to, we just need to see where things are at when you're 80, so that when you're 90, we can compare the two. So if that doesn't work, definitely send a message to me, and I'll give you a bunch of other ideas. Let's see. Sue says, thank you. Very helpful. I'm going to try and let her do it. I appreciate you answering my question. If my loved one cannot have an MRI, what is another accurate test? So the blood test is yes, it is actually. The blood test is as accurate as an MRI. Just avoid the 4-hour quizzes and tests and everything. Those are the mini memory state exam, the MoCA, which is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Then they hook them up to alpha beta brainwave test. I mean, it's so exhausting. And they expect for us to do it would be exhausting. I cannot imagine why they think this is a good idea. So I'm telling everybody, no, use science and test, not give them a bunch of questions, because that is totally subjective. And also, to your point about symptoms, and you think that it's dementia or Alzheimer's, there are so many things that could be contributing to those symptoms. First of all, medication interaction. Is she starting new medication? Has she increased or decreased a dose on a medication? That's one thing. Secondly, dehydration. As we get older, which makes me remember to do this, as we get older, we drink less, meaning drink water, lemonade, iced tea, coffee and tea are fine. So we get dehydrated. When we get dehydrated, our brains, those little lines that you see that make it look really funny, those fold, they're actually folds. Those folds collapse on each other, into themselves. And that causes brain fog. And you can't think straight and you can't remember words. So the one reason why I encourage people to live in senior communities when they get older, like 80, 85, is because they will monitor, if you ask them to, monitor hydration. And they'll make sure that a person, that they refill their water glass, that they make sure that they're staying hydrated. Most people who live alone, or like if your mom and dad are in their 70s or 80s, they're probably both dehydrated because they're not really watching what the other one's doing. Most people don't even know about this, and it does cause brain fog. Low levels of vitamin D can also cause that. So looking at a full blood panel, because it's not it's not a default in the blood panel to actually be tested for vitamin D. So you have to ask your doctor, please add the vitamin D to the blood panel. See, these are the things that, why would we know that? And yet nobody says to do it either. And it's like, oh yeah, your albumin levels and your white blood cell and your red blood cell count. And it's like, yeah, what about my vitamin D? I was really, really low on vitamin D the first time I had the test. And my doctor's like, yeah, guess what? You're going to be loading up on vitamin D. And I still take it to this day. So really important to do that full blood panel. You're very welcome. You guys are so nice. Let's see. Do you know if someone on hospice covered by Medicare, yes, can get an MRI or blood test for dementia? If they're on hospice, they probably won't approve it because that's comfort care only. And this person is passing away. So most likely. So the caveat to that, my mom was on hospice 4 times. And the reason why I put her on hospice is that she was declining. Okay, so that's the requirement, is that you have to, kind of drop off a cliff a little bit on your health. And then hospice will bring in their SWAT team, their healthcare SWAT team. And it's got like 5 different types of people. There's a care manager, there's a social worker, there's a nurse, a caregiver, and then a minister who comes in, just kind of make sure the spiritual side of things is covered. And so when you're on hospice, that's comfort care only then. But having that team, for some reason, mom would rally. And it'd be like, I have so much attention. I have staff. I have people coming and going. The additional stimulation, the additional care and attention. And so she would rally every time, and except for the 4th time, then she didn't rally. But so while on hospice, I think the answer to your question is yes, you could, but they may question why. So Medicare doesn't necessarily put apples to apples. Like they may not even check to see if if she's on hospice. So you can always take my typical advice is try it, see what happens, beg for forgiveness later. But my question to you would be, why would you want to do that? I mean, testing for dementia, excuse me, we need to focus on where the person's at and address that. And having a diagnosis, I will tell you from having lived through it, means absolutely nothing. It really does. Hang on just a moment. Something went down the wrong pipe. So think about why you want to know that. Because if it's like, well, I'm worried that I would get dementia. It's not hereditary. Only 2% of the people, when they've done these studies, only 2% of the people with Alzheimer's actually had any genetic connection to the relatives, their ancestors. It's not hereditary, it's environmental. So when families grow up together, they all eat the same thing, which is usually not good. And because we eat terribly in the United States, and we don't get exercise, our jobs are stressful. Trying to get in 6,000 steps is a challenge when you're sitting down all day, sitting in front of a computer or sitting still working on something else. So the lifestyle is really what's causing us to have increased levels of dementia in our population. It's at about 11% right now for people 65 and over. So 11% of the people 65 and over have Alzheimer's. And then there's the remaining of them that have dementia. And that's the people who go to the doctor. So we're probably counting kind of low. All right. Do any of your test recommendations provide specific insights into areas of the brain impacted? I'm assuming judgment being impacted, thus putting Jane at risk for undue influence and or exploitation. Judgment is a good one. I have a neighbor who has judgment issues, and as a result of age. And so here's the thing, our brains shrink starting in our early 40s. So forgetting things, struggling a little bit with words, that kind of thing is the natural part of aging. Not everybody has that happen, but it is a natural part of aging. So it's not unusual. What's more unusual is if somebody's sharp as a tack. And a lot of times whoever's evaluating them isn't using the ways to find out whether they are that sharp or not. So the MRI scan will do exactly that. The Arters group. It will absolutely show exactly where in the brain there are the holes, for lack of a better word. You can tell that what parts of the brain are being affected. So an MRI will tell you that information. The challenge is that you can't fix it. Like you can't, if you're using that, I guess the question is, what's the use case? Why would you, if somebody's being exploited and they have bad judgment, which I hear you on that, man, is that a tough one? Is that you can use that from a legal perspective to say this person doesn't have the proper judgment as shown by the MRI to have known what they were doing. And so therefore they are not liable for the expense they incurred. So you could do something like that, apply it in that way, but it's the MRI that does that. What is your best advice for exploring anger outbursts? That's a good one. My dad used to do that. He would get really upset, and that was vascular dementia. And the best advice I can give you is to figure out what the trigger is. So normally, definitely in my case, my dad, and normally what I hear through clients, we talk about triggers a lot. We actually have a video. This will be posted on the Learning Center at alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com. And there's a video that talks about behaviors and triggers. So you're welcome to, go look at that. But the thing that you want to do is stop the trigger so that you don't end up with the angry outbursts. And in some cases, the anger is inwardly focused, even though the behavior is also outwardly focused on you. They may yell, they may get upset, they may throw things because they're frustrated with themselves. And the more higher achieving people who have high standards for themselves, the more angry they seem to get because they're so frustrated. And think about that. I mean, my mom, I cannot imagine. She couldn't speak for the last 8 years of her life. I mean, it would just be, it was just mumbling more than anything. She couldn't walk for the last 5 years of her life. So she was full on care. And the only way she could express anything was to cry or be sad. And then it was a guessing game as to what was going on. So but with vascular dementia, the person is pretty functional. They're just really angry. So find out what the trigger is. And the trigger could be you. A lot of my clients hate that when I say that, but if you're a person who goes in and tries to take control, and dad, you need to do this, and dad, you need to do that, and why isn't this done, and why does it look like this, and you're just like boom, 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 interrogating them, or you ask them a question they don't have an answer to, and they start getting frustrated, and you keep asking questions and they don't have those answers, that's going to create that anger and frustration. So odds are there's triggers. So see if you can figure out what those triggers are and then remove them. I know a gentleman, I used to do a dementia Q&A session, and I'd have about 20 people in the room, and the gentleman said, my wife doesn't love me anymore. And I said, why do you say that? It's like, well, she threw a vase at me when I went to visit. And I said, oh, so what happened in the visit before that? And he said, well, I tried to get her to take a shower or do something, and she got really upset with me, and I got really upset with her. And I said, okay, so the number one thing that someone with Alzheimer's in particular remembers is emotions. So if you make them happy while you're visiting, they're very happy, and then they see they're still in there. They're not dead. They're still in there. They just can't express. So, you know, they can recognize that this is a person who makes them happy. Well, he got her upset, and so the next time he came to visit, she threw that vase at him. And he's like, what do I do? And I said, wow, I think you enter with a bouquet of flowers next time and maybe a new vase and chocolates and whatever it is that you guys used to do to make up. And the challenge comes too is when you don't visit enough, they can forget who you are. And that's a whole other painful situation of how do you deal with that? So, Linda. But that would be how I would remove those triggers. Next question. Why does my mom take out all of the tissues? This is it's bizarre, but it is a very typical behavior. Also has trouble writing. Yeah, so writing goes out the window pretty quickly. It usually is one of the first indications of mid-stage Alzheimer's is that they don't know where to go. Like, what was the word I was writing? So they don't remember. So there's a lot of pausing when that happens. And then if you think about it, making letters, whether they're cursive or normal handwriting, that you really have to pay attention. Like how do you make an H? If that communication center in her brain is being affected by Alzheimer's, she's not going to be able to do that. So that's not going to get better, just so you know. The tissue thing, I have yet to figure out what causes that. It tends to be an obsessive compulsive behavior. It's something she can do. That's where I would go with it, is if she's bored or she's anxious. So there's something called a busy blanket. Amazon sells them, but they have buttons and zippers and things, and this all depends. Like, so you typically late stage, these busy blankets are great because you can button flaps and they need to do something with their hands. So if she's just pulling tissues out, it's a nervous, anxious behavior. So you can't ask her what's wrong because she probably can't tell you, not because she can't vocalize, but mostly because she doesn't know. So instead, redirect her to do something with you. It honestly, depending on the stage she's at, sorting buttons, folding laundry, sorting laundry. And oh, by the way, I know this sounds terrible, but it can save your life emotionally. If they can sort or fold the laundry, and they got it all folded, then you take it upstairs or into another room, you dump it out, you mess it up, you put it back in the laundry basket and say, look, I have more. And because they're usually mid-stage to late stage, well, usually mid-stage, they're not going to know those are the same clothes. So it's helping them express their anxiety in a different way. So that's my explanation for the tissue box thing, but it is very popular. Um, let's see. Can you tell us again where to find videos? Oh, yep. I'll tell you what, I will do you one better. I will give you the link down here. There. That should work. If it doesn't, let me know that I might have made a typo. alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com/learning center. Or if you just go to alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com, it'll have a menu option that says learning center. Let's see. Oh, okay. Jennifer, thanks for your response on the testing question while on hospice. Mom has been on hospice for over a year. Wow, I am surprised. They don't usually, Medicare doesn't usually do it they do it in 90-day periods and they'll refresh once so that you can do it for 6 months, but then you have to have special dispensation in order to continue. So she's still hanging pretty tough while she is declining. I notice her memory loss and behavior issues increasing. I'm just curious what we're dealing with so I can best interact with her and understand what she is going through. She is not on her last days yet, and I can see that her behavior changes, memory loss aren't going to get better. Right. So just assume she has dementia. I mean, it's where if she's on hospice, they've removed all medications that would prolong her life. But they keep the medications that keep you comfortable. Like my mom was on LASIK because she had a lot of swelling and probably had congestive heart failure, near as I could tell. So releasing the water and, it's a diuretic. So I would just, go to my website, watch our other videos under the Learning Center. There's blogs. If it's just a matter of understanding how to communicate mostly, and how to remove the triggers for some of the behaviors. And if she has behaviors, so we use that term, but what it really means is they're angry, frustrated, and they're acting out. It doesn't mean that they used to be able to pick up a knife and fork and now they can't. So it's kind of aggressive, more of an assertive type of behavior or act. And so if you see that, that is most likely vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia, most likely vascular. So if your loved one has been on, like my dad was on heart medication from the time he was 44 and he died at 93 and a half. But he had vascular dementia the last 2 years. And that's because, and think about it, that makes sense. So we have, you hear about high cholesterol clogging the arteries. Congestive heart failure, the heart can't pump hard enough to flush the system of fluid, and then any other cardiovascular issues. Well, the heart's job is to pump oxygenated blood to the brain. When that doesn't happen, brain cells die, and as a result, you have vascular dementia. Dead brain cells, neurons are not connecting, there's no synapses, nothing. So you start to see, acting out more. And I don't know that vascular dementia, like if you did an MRI, they use it for Alzheimer's, but they don't use it for vascular dementia. But age, combination with heart issues, cardiovascular issues, definitely can head in that direction. So I don't know your mom's history. So, okay. My mom has Alzheimer's, Christine, and my father is in charge. Good luck. But she is still driving. Oh, wow. And goes out by herself. She's gotten confused or decided she didn't want to go. That happens a lot. They start to be antisocial. Halfway to a destination and gone home a couple of times. Any tips on how to address this? So it sounds like she's in the early stages of dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. I don't like to diagnose. I'm not a doctor and I'm not an MRI. But I guess the question would be, what is your father's reaction when she says these things? Now, my dad's reaction would have been, well, that's okay. I mean, he would shrug it off. And I will tell you that the dads, the male spouses, tend to shrug off the symptoms. For my reasoning, and from what I've heard from my father, is that they don't want to face what this might be. It's easier to ignore it for as long as possible. Now, that puts other people at danger and at risk, as well as your mom, but they're not thinking that way. They're thinking this is not good for me. So I would suggest so this is probably a short-term problem. Yay. The reason is that as the disease progresses, she is not going to want to go out at all. So, and it's quite possible that she didn't know how to get to her destination. And so that's why she came home, because she knew to turn around the car and knew how to get back home. So I guess the question would be, what other symptoms are you seeing? You said she has Alzheimer's. If she has Alzheimer's, she shouldn't be driving. And I always talk about take away the keys, not the car. So I've had several clients who have followed that advice and removed the keys from the individual's purse and made sure that they were hidden so they don't go searching through pockets and finding them. And, basically, this is a difficult conversation to have. The fact that she's driving is not good. It is alarming. And so I would sit down with both of them and say to your dad, mom's struggling with driving. And it's quite possible that if the car broke down, someone could take advantage of her. So what you're doing is you're not saying I'm worried that, because I can tell you that doesn't work. If you say I'm worried that, about you, they will tell you, because you're a child of theirs, they're fine. Don't worry about it. We're fine. Mind your own business, whatever it is that relationships, how we talk to each other. So instead, you've got to say, I'm concerned that someone could hurt her. Now you've triggered his protection mechanisms of her. And you can say, so if something happened to the car, or if she ends up in a place she shouldn't be, I'm worried about her getting hurt. And if you position it that way, he should react differently than you saying, we need to, mom shouldn't drive. Because now you're removing independence. She's used to driving, obviously, but she shouldn't be. And she could be taken advantage of. She could be hurt. There's bad people out there. And I don't know at what stage of Alzheimer's she has. Hopefully she's been diagnosed appropriately. By the way, there's a lot of primary care physicians who will do the mini memory state exam and diagnose dementia and be incorrect. So again, science, the Alzheimer's blood test or the MRI, because as much as we'd love to trust our doctors, they're not comprehensive in their knowledge, and scientific tests are much better than someone's opinion. So let's see. Hopefully that helped, Christine. Let's see. I had a fidget blanket. Yeah, yeah. But she broke the beads and zippers. Sorry. Yeah, so you got to get the hefty ones, because I mean think about that. Like my mom was strong until the hour she died. And so you've got to think about the frustration and the amount of motion and everything that's going on there. So you have to get a sturdier one, I guess, or make one yourself. And for the gentleman, so you might wonder, well, a fidget blanket's weird for a man. They actually have a tool set, and they have, I think they have like a screwdriver and a screw and a hammer. And so they've got kind of a workshop thing set up. So that's kind of nice. We can get a link of this recording to share with siblings that were not. Yes, so I will send that to you on Friday. So you should watch for that, Melissa. Nailed it. Mom is on hospice for the issues. Thanks, Pam. Will this be? Yes, it will be available. Okay, so everybody said thank you, and we're at the top of the hour. But I wanted to answer another question that that happens a lot. when your loved one has Alzheimer's, mid stage, even early stage, they'll say, I want to go home, or I want to see my mom. I want to visit, um, I want to see Aunt Jessie or whomever. So they've passed away. And the first instinctual response is that person's dead. The person passed away. But that's not the appropriate response because you don't know what's going to happen in their brain when you say that. They could relive that grief and you put them through it. So let's not do that. Instead, if they say I want to see that person, I want to see mom, you can say, well, she's moved away. So the industry calls it compassionate fibbing or something like that. And it's not fibbing. It's being compassionate and giving them a way to cope. It's a coping mechanism. So it's a compassionate story. And you can just say, I'll try to reach her. I haven't seen her lately, or haven't heard from her lately, or I think she's moved on. You can use all sorts of different redirection of that. It depends on the relationship and what you feel comfortable saying, but it's not lying. But the worst thing you can do is tell them that person's died. I never told my mom my father died. And I think she figured that out on her own, but because he didn't visit anymore, but I could not break her heart. She was going through so much. I just couldn't. They were together for over 60 years. So the thing about I want to go home, I have clients whose parents say, I want to go home, and they're in their home where they, spent decades. So understand that what comes out of their mouths is not what they mean. Okay. So even if they're saying something, you need to check and say, you mean you want me to what? So validate and verify what it is that they're saying. So if they say they want to go home, that means I want to go to a place. Quickly think of home. And what do you think of? Comfort, safety, familiarity, all those things that, I want to go home. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to feel safe and secure. That's what they're saying. It's just easier to say home. And they don't know all those other words anymore. So when I said, what do you do with that? You can say, I know home is such a wonderful thing, isn't it, Mom? I remember when you made cookies for us at Christmas. So I remember, not do you remember? Because then you're flaunting the fact that they can't. So they will say no, and then they get frustrated, and that's not down the path we want to go. So never ask them a question like that. Instead, put it on you. I remember when you did X and we did this, and you're basically telling a story about a memory you have with her or with your family. And that will bring comfort and calmness, because ultimately it's depending on the situation. When they say, I want to go home, it's because they're not feeling safe. They're not feeling confident. They're not feeling they're in a familiar environment. They're scared. So you got to step in and be that comfort, that security blanket. And I actually gave my mom a baby doll. My brother and sister-in-law sent it for her birthday. And that made her feel secure. She loved stuffed animals, little stuffed animals and stuff. So she would hold those. And so when we bring comfort, think about those type of tools that will help them cope with the changes that are going on. They're very much aware of them, and it's got to be hell, honestly, to be aware of that and not be able to do anything about it. And so that's one of the reasons they act out. All right, we are at the top of the hour. I love you guys. Thank you so much for the interactions and the chat. Again, go to my website, alzheimersfamily.com, and ask for a 30-minute consult or reply to one of my emails. I also want to say thank you to Kelch Communities for sponsoring these. so that we can help as many people in a caregiving situation as you guys are in. So be patient, be kind, take care of yourselves, go for walks, take respite, be good to yourselves. Okay. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And we will see you next month. Take care. Bye bye.